Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This video is all about... I wanted to do something different with this next series of videos. Normally, my video is an entire project from start to finish, but this next project, ooh, pretty. I wanted to break it up into several smaller videos going more in depth with each step of the process. So that way I can explain things a little more, maybe help you guys out a little bit. So at the end of this series, I will be giving away this Suncatcher. This could be yours on my Instagram page. So if you want to follow me on Samantha Ashley Glass, and you can look out for the giveaway, and then you can enter it. Cool. Alright, so let's get into the videos. Alright, you guys, let's talk about foiling. So, once again, everything I am going to go through today is just the method I use to do this process. So I like to keep my pattern handy because after I foil the pieces, I like to put it on my pattern, make sure everything fits nicely, and if I need to do any last minute grinding adjustments, then I can do that before everything is foiled. You'd hate to foil everything and then put it together and realize, oh, that doesn't fit quite the way I wanted it to. And then the last couple details, I'm adding these pretty little nuggets to dangle down. Okay, so let's look at some of the tools. So you want to have your pattern. You want to have some sort of scissors to cut your foil. You can use your fingers to rip the foil. I like to use embroidery scissors. You need some sort of razor blade, because if you don't line up your foil perfectly end to end, you're going to have a little overhang that you're going to want to trim up just to keep your solder lines clean and consistent. And then you want something to burnish the foil. Some people use fids. This is a fid. I personally like this little, I don't even know what this is for originally. It's some sort of stylus, but this is the tool that I've always used for burnishing. Works well for me. And then I keep black backed foil, silver backed foil, and copper backed foil on hand, all in different widths. Sometimes you'll find you want thinner lines, solder lines, sometimes you want thicker solder lines, or based on the thickness of your glass, you need to go between different widths. Some people say that the color backing you use is personal preference, and I mean, to a degree it is, but especially if you're using transparent glass, you're going to see the color backing of your foil through it. For some people it might not be very noticeable, but for others it will be, so just keep that in mind. I tend to use the backing that corresponds to the color solder lines I'm going to use, no matter if I'm using transparent glass or opaque glass, just to keep consistent. Because even if you're using it, so I found, for example, I foiled some white glass that was mostly opaque, and I used the copper backed foil, and it gave the white glass sort of a coppery glow around the edge. And then if you use black backed foil on the white glass, it gives kind of a blackish glow around the edge. So if I ever foil white glass again, I'll probably use silver backed foil, no matter what color my solder lines are going to be, because the silver backed foil won't give such a noticeable glow, if that makes sense. You just kind of have to experiment with how things look, how you like them, That's the beauty of art. It's all personal preference. But sometimes it makes sense to do things a certain way. Before I foil a piece, I like to wipe down my glass pieces with isopropyl alcohol. Just to make sure any dust is off the edges, and I want to make sure there's no paint left on my edges, because you don't want any paint under your foil, especially on clear glass like this. And the alcohol usually gets the paint markers off pretty easily. Unless the paint's been sitting on here for like a week, then sometimes I need to scrape it off. But usually it's not too bad. Alright, last piece. Okay, let's start foiling. So in the end, this piece is going to have a black patina, so I want to use black backed foil. I'm going to be using the 7/32 width foil. That's my go-to foil width. I think it gives it not too thick of a solder line, but not too thin either. So what you want to do is you always want to start on an inner edge that's going to be covered. You don't want to start and end on an outside edge. So just make sure you center your piece of glass on your foil. And then kind of use your finger to stick it down as you go. And I mean, the more you do this, the quicker you'll get. And then when you get back to the beginning, just make sure you overlap a little bit and line it up. And then cut. Okay, and then we take our burnishing tool, go around the perimeter. And the reason we burnish is, A, you want the adhesive to stick, but if you don't burnish, so if you just fold your edges over and leave it like this without burnishing, then when you go to solder, you're going to, A, there's a greater chance that the heat of the solder and the soldering iron is going to just pop the foil off, and B, you're going to get a wavy, wobbly solder line. It's not going to sit flat and nicely against the glass. The point of foil is not to hold your piece together, it's just to, I mean, like the adhesive part of the foil isn't to hold your structure together, it's just to give you a nice place for the solder to adhere. You can also use your fingers to fold the foil over. I just like using tools, I don't want to mess up my hands too much. So when you get to corners, you want to like do a nice fold over at the corner. So I like to go right into the edge. And then when you're doing curves, you want to go slowly back and forth. Just see, this isn't a very deep curve, so it's not difficult, but if it was a deeper curve, you'd go slowly back and forth, because you're trying to stretch out the foil. You don't want it to break on you. And then when you're done, go back, burnish the sides. And the front side is more textured, so when I'm burnishing, I use the tip of this to make sure I'm getting in between the grooves as best as I can. And there we go. And you'll see it. So right there is where my copper overlapped, and you can't even tell. That is the end goal. I will show you an example of not lining it up, and then you can just take your razor and fix it. Okay, so I'm gonna do this piece next. There are only two spots where I can start my foil. This inside curve or this top curve here. I don't want to start my foil on this outside, and I don't want to start my foil on this outside down here either. So again, burnish the perimeter. And you don't need a fancy tool for burnishing. You can use a pen, a marker. All right, let's see where my foil. Okay, so you can see my foil. I probably should have done a little more extreme example. The foil doesn't line up perfectly. And you can kind of see through the glass to the other side on this one. So what you're gonna do, super simple, take your razor and then just clean it up. Now you're good. Perfect. Okay, this piece that I'm foiling right now, it is super duper ridged on the front. I will show you in a second. So it's super ridged, so I can't just leave the foil like this. I need to, this is where the little point of my stylus comes in handy to really get into these grooves. And now when I go to solder, so when you use super textured glass, when you go to solder, you're not gonna get a straight bead. Your bead might look a little funky. It's not that there's anything wrong with your beading or the solder or anything. It's just that's what happens because you see how it's kind of wavy looking a little bit. Now this is a standalone little dangly gem, so the way the solder looks isn't really gonna, it's not gonna look weird or anything. Okay, so there we go. Now the foil is in between the grooves like that. Oh. And you want to go gently so that you don't break the foil in any of these grooves. And then there's just the slightest little overhang. And sometimes if you don't get every little piece of foil that overhangs slightly, if you just didn't notice it or whatnot, after you foil, sometimes if you notice it, you can just take a little razor blade and just kind of chop off little pieces of solder that are sticking off in weird spots. Okay, so let's check in on our piece so far. So this half is foiled and it fits perfectly. I didn't have to do any more grinding, which is good. Okay, now I'll just finish up these last two pieces. Side note, the little nuggets I'm not foiling because I'm going to be wrapping them in hobby came. I used to foil and solder my nuggets, but it's much easier to just use hobby came.